Well, we are talking about the one and only Colonel Harland Sanders. He opened up Colonel Sanders Court and Cafe, which we were talking about, the original Colonel Sanders, which is now, today it's a museum as well as a restaurant. But originally he had like a hotel back there, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It's in North Corbin, Kentucky. He franchised it out. The first franchise was actually 66 or 67 years ago in the early 50s in Salt Lake City, Utah. He had this great idea, though, to franchise out the concept of his fried chicken. I want to just mention at the start how important it is. There is only one city that I can come to and talk about a fast food icon, and that's this one. Because there is only one fast food product that is so distinctly associated with both one person and one location as Kentucky Fried Chicken. If you say who are the most recognizable human beings that have ever walked on this earth, he is way up on the list. It's like, well, George Washington is up there, Jesus Christ, and Colonel Sanders. Literally, you can't drive down any stretch of road for more than a half hour without seeing his face. You can't turn on the television without seeing his face. He's so associated with this. I wanted to show you some of the other founders of fast food restaurants and show you how, to some degree, some of them are rather obscure. This is Dave Thomas. Dave Thomas worked with Colonel Sanders. Everybody does remember him. He actually was also a colonel, which I found very funny. In the one of the biographies I saw on Colonel Sanders, he was like, Dave Thomas said he made his whole life about the fact that he was a colonel. He wore the outfit. He's like, I'm a colonel. He's like, but Dave Thomas, of course, did go on to do commercials, and so people did recognize him towards the latter end of his life. The first Wendy's was in Columbus, Ohio, but Dave Thomas was from Atlantic City, New Jersey. Again, not nearly as recognizable as the fact that Colonel Sanders is from Kentucky. This is the guys who did McDonald's. So has anybody seen the movie The Founder? It's good, right? Did you like it? I thought it was real neat. The movie is about these two guys, the McDonald brothers, and Ray Kroc. Ray Kroc was a businessman who went to their restaurant. It was McDonald's, and he really liked it and saw how well it was doing. And they gave him a tour and told him how they did everything. And he then wanted to buy in, and they didn't want him to, and they reluctantly let him, and he eventually took over the whole thing. And there's a scene in the movie, I don't know how true it is to reality, but the one brother says to him, he's like, why didn't you just steal it? We told you how we did everything. And he's like, because I wanted the name McDonald's, because it doesn't mean anything. It's everything for everybody. He's like, if I called it Crocs, nobody would come to it. But that's Ray Kroc and the McDonald brothers. The McDonald brothers were from New Hampshire, and Ray Kroc was from California, and the first McDonald's was in San Bernardino, California, 1955. So there are franchises that are older than that, but this is not one. This is close though. This is the founder of Taco Bell. That's Glenn Taco. It's Glenn Bell. Glenn Bell was the founder of Taco Bell. He was born in Linwood, California, which is also the home of a famous singer, Weird Al Yankovic. Weird Al Yankovic, Linwood, California. What? I prefer the old Weird Al though, with the mustache. I like the mustache Weird Al, but I dig it. The first Taco Bell, though, was 1962 in Downey, California. Here's a more obscure one. The founders of White Castle, here they are with their plane. White Castle was formed in 1921. Walt Anderson and Billy Ingram, the founders of White Castle. I like the people coming in now. They're like, oh, we're at the White Castle panel. I'm in the wrong room. Go down the hall. Wait, get a load of this guy. The founder of Popeyes. This is Al Copeland. This guy, I would love if I ever do a whole show in Louisiana. I'm gonna do it. You guys all got to come because I'm gonna talk about this guy. This guy was just a nut. This guy, he would buy race cars and then he would allow, be like, well, I'm gonna give a lot of money to your race if I can drive my car in your race. And he was like a billionaire, and he's like driving around in his Popeyes car, and then he had a Popeyes speedboat. He was really an interesting guy. But he was born in New Orleans, and the first KFC, or his first Popeyes, I mean, was in 1972, and it was near New Orleans. It was in Louisiana, near New Orleans, and so that's Popeyes. Burger King started in Miami. Under the name Insta Burger King. And again, I mean, it's like nobody knows who started the Burger King. It was, I wrote it down just because I didn't even remember. Keith Kramer, Matthew Burns, David Egerton, and James McElmore. Not nearly as famous as this man, the one and only Colonel Sanders. So he really made himself where he was an iconic character that will exist forever and is connected so exclusively to his brand, which is connected so exclusively to his state, which I think is just wonderful. Here is a vintage commercial. I hear that if you met him, he'd let you lick his fingers. It is the greatest jingle ever. If you want some fried chicken, you have to visit me. That's supposed to be the man that just went, well, I'm going to tell you about this chicken. It's really good. But then when he gets into a singing voice, it's all baritone. He says, if you want some fried chicken, you have to visit me. Here is... this commercial would not play today. This is a little outdated. Take a look. Hold on, let me see if I can make this louder real quick. Nope, we're at 100%. I cannot. Sorry. So everybody just strain your ears and pretend that you're listening.
Piece of that tender young chicken is seasoned in Colonel Sanders' secret recipe of 11 different herbs and spices and cooked to finger-licking good perfection. So whenever you're pressed for time, you feel like a night off, let the Colonel and his boys answer the question of what to get for dinner. Kentucky Fried Chicken.
This is Colonel Sanders, and I'm happy to say it's time for another 2-for-1 sale. In all of my Kentucky Fried Chicken stores across Canada, when you buy one snack pack at the regular price, you get another one free. That's my cross-Canada 2-for-1 sale, Thursday, April the 26th only.
The man found a way to mansplain dinner. He's like, me and my boys, right? They're very specific. They're like, there's no ladies in the kitchen. All right. Colonel Sanders, he put out a multitude of albums. He put out Christmas Eve with Colonel Sanders. So like Christmas Eve, you settle around with the family. You're like, let's listen to Colonel Sanders. You can see Colonel Sanders there. He's like, starting to doze off. Santa's going to be there soon. He's got his cup of milk and 2 chicken legs sitting there next to the fireplace. And so then the next day, you're like, oh, man, if only we could listen to that album again. But sadly, it's no longer Christmas Eve. Well, then you listen to Christmas Day with Colonel Sanders. Yes, Christmas Day with Colonel Sanders is a whole new day. It's where you learn that the true Santa Claus is Colonel Sanders. And then you're like, well, what do I listen to the other 363 days out of the year? Well, of course, Colonel Sanders' Tijuana Picnic. Colonel Sanders has his Tijuana Picnic with the whitest people he could find. It's just like, he's like, we're not in Tijuana. But there's Colonel Sanders' Tijuana Picnic. These albums, this was actually a somewhat common phenomenon at that time. Like you would have, if you were a company and it was coming up on holiday time or summertime, your company may put out an album and people would buy it because it would be cheaper than buying the songs. Back then, you couldn't just go on iTunes and buy one song, so you'd have to buy, if you wanted Bing Crosby's White Christmas and you wanted to have Frank Sinatra's, Christmas song and the, whatever, this would be like a compilation album. Not this one. This was Tijuana songs about KFC. But this one would be, you'd get like, some popular different, there's Al Hurt, which he played the horn, was real great. Henry Mancini, who did he did like the music for the Pink Panther movies and stuff. So you'd get like a bunch of different artists on one album. I have a series of albums that have a Firestone tire on the front with like Christmas decorations. They've turned it into like a wreath. Colonel Sanders, this is some outtakes from him doing a voiceover commercial. Colonel Sanders was an interesting guy, not always the most pleasant person, and here is a bit of that.
Kentucky Fried Chicken. Let me get that scratched off of there and quit looking at it. Quiet, please! That real crusty, what kind of damn crispy?
It's real crusty. What is the goddamn thing?
Now you can have two kinds of Kentucky Fried Chicken to choose from. My regular recipe and my new extra crisp. Crispy. New extra crispy. I thought I said that. Now you have two kinds of Kentucky Fried Chickens to choose from. It's entirely different. It every bit is finger-licking good, you see. Every bit is finger-licking good. You see, I found a way to cook chicken deep down to get that real crispy crust some folks like. I better do that again, huh? Yes. All right. You don't want me to sing, do you, for Christ's sake? We're rolling?
No, but we know if he does sing, he sings in a beautiful way.
Most folks have heard about it.
All right, that's good. Good, very nice.
That's why folks call it finger.
Sounds good.
That's why folks call it finger licking good. That's right. That's why folks call it finger licking good.
This is exactly you trying to get your great grandpa to record a commercial. That's what this is. I mean, it's interesting though. He became a success much later in life, which gives hope for all of us. I think he was 61 years old when he really became successful. He really became a household name. So let me show you. Not that we've seen it. This was him as a baby. It was baby Colonel. Has anybody been to the Marriott? They have the visitor center in the front of the Marriott. Ooh, you guys went. You got your picture with him. You guys all got to go. We should all go right now, really. They have a big giant wax statue of the Colonel, and they have his whole life. You could have gone, and then you wouldn't have had to come here. You could have read all that. Colonel Sanders then grew up to be a man after he was baby first. Later, there were steps in between, but you get what happens. He became a tire salesman. He would sell tires. Then he ran for Senate, state Senate. He didn't win, but he came within 127 votes. I do not know how many votes there were total, so there may have been 128, Here is a picture of him with his 5 grandchildren. And you'll kind of notice that his Colonel Sanders look is not that wasn't his regular look. Like here he is with his wife, Claudia. That's what the restaurant is named after. Claudia Sanders. This is them when they got married, and she had been an employee at the KFC company, and he met her and fell in love, and they got married in 1948. But you can see Colonel Sanders, he was cosplaying as Colonel Sanders, it was a gimmick. Let's take a look. This is a little later, 1979, and I think we get to hear Colonel Sanders' beautiful singing voice again. So now I will fight anybody that says that is not the singing voice of Colonel Sanders, because I know he does speak of himself in the third person in that, where he's like, you have to visit the colonel, but he clearly says you have to visit me. So unless there's some other guy that is always at every KFC you go to, they're just talking about the colonel. I don't know why I put these in here twice, other than that you should see them twice. But instead, here's the colonel. There's his two twin brothers. There's all three of the colonels. Now, those were cardboard cutouts of the colonel, and the colonel was very proud to stand between them. Actually, he kind of looks like he's depressed. He's like, God damn it, they're replacing me. Here's his business card. I just love it. I just find that, that's just his number. It was 5. They only had 4 numbers back then. What's your number? 151580. Like, is there more? He's like, nope. I got one of the first ones. Yeah, you'd have to crank it. The operator would pick up. You'd say 1580. Be like, oh, it's Colonel Sanders, right? You guys calling to hear him sing? So you got to do that Tijuana picnic again. Colonel Sanders, I want to show you this because I find this very interesting. This is a segment from a show called What's My Line? And Colonel Sanders was a guest on the show. And it was a game show. People would come on and they would be asked yes or no questions by the panel. And the panel of celebrities would ask them questions. And they would try to guess who they are. And what I find so interesting about this is, as we've talked about, this is one of the most recognizable human beings that ever lived. They don't know who the hell he is. Like, he comes in, they have no idea who he is. Let me show you guys this. I might go over there to play these sounds. Okay, here we go. It's a long segment, so I'm going to play some of it, then I'll skip ahead. But here he is. He's showing up. He's writing his name. So
Sanders. Is that right, sir? That's right.
They even know his name. And they still don't.
Colonel Sanders, would you tell us where you're from? I'm from Shelbyville, Kentucky. Shelbyville, Kentucky. That's right.
And what part of the state is that, sir?
That's along the west central side, near Louisville, Kentucky.
Near Louisville?
Yeah, 29 miles from Louisville.
It's lovely country. It's nice
Yes,
to have you. May I present the panel, Colonel?
Notice, by the way, he says Louisville, which everybody here apparently doesn't say.
Next thing I think that we need to do,
If there's anything to fight over, I think that is.
let the audience here in the theater and the audience at home know exactly what your line is. Panel, we can tell you that Colonel Sanders is self-employed and deals in a product, and we'll begin the general questioning with Arlene Francis.
Colonel, I don't know what you do, but I think you look too beautiful to work.
I do plenty of work.
Is your product anything that I might use?
Yes, ma'am. I hope you do.
Is it any product that I could hold in my hand?
Yes.
Is it anything that I would put into my mouth?
Yes, indeed.
I would eat it or drink it?
You would eat it.
Thank you, Colonel. I know you're a Southern gentleman now.
I'm just going to flip a few cards on that account, I think, just for fun.
Is it something that I might have in association with the main meal?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it a grain rather than a meat or a vegetable?
That makes it 5 down and 5 to go, Mr. Gable.
Is this wonderful foodstuff of yours, does it grow in Kentucky, Colonel?
Yes, it does.
Is it improved by that famous bluegrass of Kentucky?
Yes. Well, just let me have a small conference with the Colonel.
Horse meat.
Actually, would you ask the question again? Because the Colonel wants to be sure that he answered it correctly.
Well, I know that your great state has marvelous soil, that famous bluegrass of Kentucky, has a number of other things. But is this product of yours, which is not meat and not grain...
No, which is not grain.
Oh.
Miss Francis, now I think that the marital relationship with Mr. Gable here shouldn't be allowed.
I think it's just come to an end, John.
This goes on for another 45 minutes, so I'm going to skip ahead. So they ask these yes or no questions, and then I'm going to cut to one of the last questions here.
Chicken now. What's the matter with you all?
So he stumped them, and I want to point out he got $50 for being on the show. That was the top prize. This was before Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. They had Who Wants to Make $50. Here's Colonel Sanders with Alice Cooper. And like a waiter who's like, holy crap, that's Colonel Sanders and Alice Cooper. Even Alice Cooper's like, holy crap, that's Colonel Sanders. And then Colonel Sanders is like, I don't know who the hell this guy is. Here's a picture. This is a good one. This is Jack Dempsey. Jack Dempsey was a boxing champion. Colonel Sanders kicked his ass. Then Colonel Sanders fought a horse. You know, Colonel Sanders is like, I wonder how we could deep fry this horse. Here is a clip from a motion picture that had a bunch of different cameos. It was a movie called The Finks, and the concept of it was that there were this mysterious rock band that had to go, they had been kidnapped by an evil dictator. It's a comedy. And the dictator had kidnapped all of his favorite pop culture figures. And you'll see, this is like a murderer's row lineup of pop culture figures. And Richard Pryor is in the movie. He's not in this scene. But it's a huge amount of big stars, and one of them is the Colonel in this movie, The Finks. So let me show you this. I think you can, without hearing it, get the point. So there's the group, the rock band, The Finks. They're looking there. The guy kidnapped Colonel Sanders to serve him food. And so there's Colonel. He brought his bucket. Yeah, I know. He's in the kitchen, but yet he brought a bucket. I almost can guarantee that was part of the deal, though. He was like, well, I need the bucket to be on camera. That, of course, is from the high-definition Blu-ray edition. Colonel Sanders, I was mentioning, he did a lot of appearances in movies. So this is from a movie called Blast Off Girls. In the credits, they not only have Colonel Sanders, but they have a picture of him, so you know who he is. I'm going to show you a clip from this one. Why did they use the... Well, Colonel Sanders originated memes in the I Can Has Cheeseburger. So this is a scene from Blast Off Girls. The concept of this was, if any movie found Colonel Sanders anywhere, if like a movie company found him and they were like, hey, we want to put you in the movie, he's like, great, I will cater the whole production. I'll do whatever I can to get my face on screen. A wonderful self-marketer. So this is a scene from, I'm going to show this also in two parts because Colonel Sanders is obviously in the bulk of this film, but this is a scene from Blast Off Girls. I'll see if I got to come down there.
Do we serve fried chicken? Well, we do serve fried chicken.
Yeah, man? Well, make with about half a dozen orders. I got 5 hungry musicians out there.
Musicians, did you say?
Man, they ain't nuclear physicists.
Oh, and I love music. I'll tell you what, if you set them up and play me some good, soft music, you can have dinners on the house.
Man, you got a deal.
Good.
Hey, you guys, I just made a deal. Lunch is $1 each if we deliver some music. Good deal, huh? Give me $1.
It says something when Colonel Sanders is out acting you in your film. I'm not sure this is worth a fried chicken dinner. There you go. He's waiting for his cue to come back. All right, I'm going to skip ahead. That's the beginning again. All right, so this is the end of the sequence. Colonel Sanders, he gets like the end. This is like if there was a sitcom, they're like, and Colonel Sanders as Grandpa. What's that? Is there a question? Oh, I was going to say, I hope there's no questions. I only know the information I'm saying. I have no more in-depth information. There was a 1970s New Yorker profile after Colonel Sanders had sold the KFC restaurant to a conglomerate that said that Colonel Sanders was so tough on the franchisees that he would drive up unsuspecting, order food, and then come in there and yell at them and throw the food on the counter if he didn't like it. And he never liked it. Are you cosplaying back there? You, yes. Oh, wait, let me take a guess. Oh, you got a wig. See, now I don't know. I thought I knew before. What is it? See, I thought, and I was like, you should have done, like wrinkles and stuff, but I thought you were the Six Flags guy. Do you remember the Six Flags guy? The Six Flags guy was great. He was like the modern Colonel Sanders. It's like the Colonel Sanders of roller coasters. So Colonel Sanders, I mentioned, would franchise out the chicken, and these restaurant owners, like you can see this one, it's called the Ross Inn, and they say, we have Colonel Sanders chicken, would give 4 cents for each chicken that they sold as part of their franchising fee. And what they would get for that was the method, which was using a pressure cooker, which Colonel Sanders, when he started using the pressure cooker, he had bought it to cook green beans and other things like that, and then found it worked well for cooking chicken. Because back then, before you had other deep frying methods and things, it would take about a half hour to really pan fry your chicken. And so he found that this cooked it very fast. So he would give you that information, and he would give you bags with the 11 herbs and spices. You wouldn't know what they were, but you would get them, and then you could mix them, and then you could say that you had Colonel Sanders fried chicken. So he sold the company in 1964 for $2 million, which is the equivalent of $15 million. They offered him $4 million, according to him. They never commented on this, but he actually brought the $2 million out on the Tonight Show. He had it on a cart and had a Brinks truck pull up, and they rolled it out, and he said, well, I want to thank you all because you guys are the ones responsible for me having this, so I thought you should see it. But he claimed that they offered him $4 million, and he said, he was like, well, I'm rather old. I'm 73 years old, so I don't think I need $4 million. I could probably get by on $2 million. And he did. But yeah, he brought it on the Tonight Show, and they brought it on stage in a plastic cage and had like 2 guys standing next to it. That would be the greatest robbery heist movie ever. Here's another Colonel Sanders commercial because, boy, we need more. They loved their jingles back then. Oh, and sinus headaches are a special problem. All right, here he is. This is the great meeting between Colonel Sanders and Mickey Mouse. He met a lot of dignitaries in his life. Here he is with Ronald McDonald. He's just like, who the hell are you? Colonel Sanders died in Louisville, Kentucky. He died at the Jewish Hospital, which the one that's there now, that giant one, is not the one he died in. He died in 1980. He was 90 years old, but they had a different hospital then. It was smaller, and I was trying to find exactly where it was, and it's hard to find because the address has changed on the street, but it was not far from there. So he died very close to where we are now, and extremely uniquely, he is the only non-governor in the history of Kentucky to lie in state. So after he died, that's him in the coffin. This was his he lie in state, like a governor would do in the state of Kentucky. But they put him in there. Then they had a large funeral, which over 1,000 people attended at the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary Chapel. And he is buried right around the corner in Cave Hill Cemetery. He's buried in, of course, his white suit with the black tie. So you look at this grave, right, and you're like, wow, that's a fantastic, amazing grave. That's so sweet that, his family, I guess, maybe thought of putting this grave. No. Colonel had this grave built long before he died. Here's a picture of him visiting his own grave. And you can see the modern pictures, there's all these bushes and everything. This was right when it was put in, so the ground was all clear. Colonel Sanders endowed the cemetery with money. So the franchise the company gives money every year to that cemetery. So they have that nice stripe that'll take you right to his grave, and it takes care of a lot of the upkeep of the whole cemetery, which is great. But and the bust of Colonel Sanders was designed by his wife, by the way. By the way, this picture is impossible to find online. I was looking for this forever because I had seen it, and I finally found it. I actually bought this picture 8x10 at a news. It was a thing where it was at a flea market. They had news photographs in a bin, and I bought this, and I can't find this anywhere. So you guys, look, do not take a picture. You put this online. I know you get thousands of hits, but this is just for you guys. All right, we saw this already. Enough with that. All right. The Colonel Sanders original recipe. So in 2016, up until then, this was a secret. Nobody knew what it was. But in 2016, Colonel Sanders' nephew, whose name was Joe Ledington, found in a book, a piece of paper, found in a book that was owned by Colonel Sanders, by his uncle, a handwritten note that had the 11 herbs and spices. And it was published, and they went through and tested it. I've done this, and it is absolutely tastes exactly like the seasoning from KFC. The only thing is, if you buy, I'm going to tell you what this is. So you're going to need salt, which everybody has. You need thyme, basil, oregano, celery salt, black pepper, dried mustard, paprika, garlic salt, ground ginger, which I also had to buy, white pepper, which is the big one, which you have to buy. So I had to buy $30 worth of seasoning to make $2 worth of chicken if I had gone to could have gone over there and got a Chicken Little, and some potato wedges. But you can find that. So if you go online, if you ever want to make it yourself, or if you want to experiment, go crazy, be like, I'm going to make some chicken fried steak, but with the Colonel's recipe, you can do that today. There was a unique thing that happened. I followed Colonel Sanders on Twitter when I started. I followed KFC. Did you follow KFC? Well, it's a great story. I followed him. I was like, oh, this is great. They followed me back, which is a big deal to me. Really big deal. I will tell you, if you go to my Twitter account right now, it says my only bio, because this is the most important accomplishment of my life, is I am followed by Elio's Frozen Pizzas on Twitter. But at the time, I was followed by Colonel Sanders and KFC, and then they unfollowed me. And I was like, what the hell? And I looked, and they were just following, a group of people. I was like, oh, they're following 10 people. And I'm looking, I'm like, they were following the Spice Girls. They were following a couple herbs. And so I was like, oh, they're following herbs and spices. That's really funny. So they were following 11 herbs and spices, or herbs and spices, right? So I saw this. I thought it was funny. I didn't tweet it. I just moved on with my day. what they did was they were waiting for somebody to notice and tweet it. And the first person to tweet it got this incredible, awesome painting. This could have been me. I'd have killed the Colonel. But this could have been me and the Colonel hiking by this. Look at this deer. He's like, holy crap, the Colonel's giving that guy a piggyback ride. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I could have a little card that says, Dear Colonel, how come? What are these footprints? And he's like, well, that's where I walked alongside you for your whole life, guy. And I'll say, but at one point, there's only one set of footprints. Colonel, why did you leave me in the most important parts of my life? And he's like, that's when I gave you a goddamn piggyback ride. And I was like, oh, this makes sense. But so I was tweeting about this, and somebody contacted me, and he was like, wait a minute, I was the first guy to do this. And I was like, did they send you a painting? And he's like, no, they sent me a crappy Photoshop, which is not nearly as good. This guy was the legitimate first one, but he didn't tag the KFC account. So they weren't doing a vanity search, so they didn't find it. So here is a story I did not talk about last year. But I found out about this before last year, but I didn't think it was as interesting until I dug deeper into it. Colonel Sanders, there is a Norman Rockwell painting of Colonel Sanders. And it was later in Rockwell's life, and one of the ways you could tell that is if you look down here, Norman Rockwell's signature, that is the sloppiest Norman Rockwell signature I've ever seen. I mean, it's like kind of going off to one side. It's not, spaced out perfectly. But there was a man named Winston Shelton, and he invented the colorectomatic, which sounds like, it's not colon rectal, it's almost like collect and then ER, but it sounds like it's some kind of terrible device that you would need at the doctor's, but it is not. It was a special self-frying oven that would fill itself with oil, and then it would drain itself and refill itself, and it was a dramatic step forward past the pressure cooking days that they used in the 1970s. And so this guy made a fortune off Colonel Sanders, this Winston Shelton. And so Winston Shelton said, as a way to repay Colonel Sanders for all his kindness and for helping me so much with my company, I'm going to buy Colonel Sanders a Norman Rockwell painting of himself. So he approached Norman Rockwell, and here's Norman Rockwell posing with the Colonel. So in 1973, he said, look, I want to get a painting of Colonel Sanders. And Rockwell said, I can't do it. I'm 79 years old, and it's a lot of work for me to do commissions, so I just can't do this. And he said, well, I want you to know Colonel Sanders is 83 years old, and he works 7 days a week, and he works more than 10 hours a day. And so Norman Rockwell was like, God damn it, all right, I'll do it. So here's Shelton and his wife here in the middle. And there's Colonel Sanders and his wife there, who almost look like twins. But did you notice this with couples? Like towards the end of your life, you and your wife, you start to turn into, not yet. It takes a long time to happen. But I think like around the time you hit 80, you just start to look alike. Like they don't look like each other yet, but I can guarantee if we had a picture of them from 20 years after, Norman Rockwell, his wife wasn't there, but I'm sure she looked exactly like him. She had passed on, but looked exactly like that. And then this is the children of this couple. So they paid $8,000 to have Colonel Sanders have himself immortalized forever in a Norman Rockwell painting. So there you go. I want to talk to you guys about Kentucky Christmas, because Kentucky Christmas is the greatest thing ever. What's that? Oh, yes, yeah. Kentucky Christmas in Japan, they do not celebrate Christmas, or at least they didn't until at one time KFC was franchised out there. The Colonel came to Japan in the 1980s, kind of beat the other fast food franchises out there, and they said, you know what we need to do? We need to find a way to drum up business in our restaurants. So one of the restaurant owners was like, I'm going to dress up as Santa Claus, and I'll give out presents and the kids won't even know it's coming. They won't understand it, but they'll associate it with our restaurant. And so because of this, to this day in Japan, they call Christmas Kentucky Christmas. And they think of Santa as being Colonel Sanders. And I'm going to show you some of the commercials. These are commercials you normally can only see in Japan on Japanese television or in this weird panel room right here in Kentucky. So take a look. I might have to come over there and push the sound. Hold on. Now, I know you're like, that song is so catchy. I hope they play that 100 more times. You can get a special bucket there. It has food, but also has like a dessert and a salad. Man, look, she's flying. Now you may say, "Oh, Christmas is only one day a year." Not Kentucky Christmas. Kentucky Christmas is 3 days. It's a 3-day celebration. All right, this is the last one. All right, there you go. Oh, no, there's more. Yeah, they've added some days. All right, it's over. That's the last one, I promise. She's turned into Tinkerbell. So that's the last commercial. I want you to pay close attention. This is my favorite one. Or maybe this one is. All right, take a close look. There's Santa in his sleigh, right? No, that's Colonel Sanders in his sleigh. So there you go. That is from the Blu-ray Criterion edition of the. And I also have the making of the Kentucky Christmas commercials. They were very important. I just want to show you this just to show how we won't understand it. There's subtitles also in Japanese, I believe. He's like, "You're going to be over there." See, that's how she did that flying move. Let's try it again. Seriously, you guys didn't think you'd be seeing this, right? I hope we have another hour. Do we have another hour? There she goes. They should have played that other song, right? It would have. Doo-da-doo-da-doo-da. This is the biggest thing, though. People will line up for days before Kentucky Christmas starts, and they'll stay outside overnight to get their bucket. It's like they do a little interview with her here. I think it's coming up. She actually I had a friend that actually spoke Japanese that watched this, and she talks about how important and talks about her Christmas memories, which are exclusively connected to KFC. Hope you guys are taking this all in. This is like you would have somebody that was like, oh, I won the Oscar for this film. I'm going to tell you in depth about how much it means to me. She was moved almost to tears about Kentucky Christmas. All right, let's take a look at this. Colonel Sanders had his own comic book in 1969. There he is, some guy spying on him back there, trying to find out that recipe. Now, they made more than one issue of the Colonel Sanders comic, which would be surprising on its own. But for some reason, both in 1969 and in 2017, they decided to make a comic book about two Colonel Sanders. This is the Not So Great Imposter from 1969. And then in 2017, DC was like, we need two colonels as well. So they did basically a reboot of the Colonel Sanders. There's the Flash. It's like, holy crap, there's two Colonel Sanders. All right, this is the weirdest commercial I have. This is just a very, almost disturbing commercial. Take a look at this. I'm going to come down there and pump up the sound. They're doing a lie detector test on the Colonel.
We want it now. You're going to tell us now?
Why?
They want the recipe.
Tell us.
First we take some eggs and some milk and
Yes, Colonel.
some flour and savory.
And
then we have 4 ounces.
4 ounces of what?
4 ounces of 4 ounces of grandfather's overcoat.
Give up, girls. How to blend 11 herbs and spices that make Kentucky Fried Chicken so finger-licking good. That's the Colonel's secret. Forever.
Now, Colonel, let's try it again. And this time the truth.
Finally, I had 3 shoelaces and a hubcap.
That's actually part of the ingredients, though, really. So these women kidnapped Colonel Sanders. They tied him to a chair, and they're trying to force him to give that recipe up. Man, that would also be a good movie. All right, let's see here. Not that. Okay. So you guys know they've had like 1 billion colonels now. I thought it was really funny when they first brought back the Colonel. I thought that was kind of a clever idea. And they've now had every actor you can imagine. There's Reba McEntire as Colonel Sanders. There's George Hamilton as the extra crispy Colonel. This is my favorite one. This is Jason Alexander, George from Seinfeld, in a Colonel Sanders commercial.
Dinner is over, but we don't want him to go. And that's the premise for this TV show. Now when Mom and Dad drop the ball, the Colonel is there to answer the call. Let the Colonel take care of it. He can do everything better somehow. The Colonel is your mom now. Also, he's your dad and the mailman Joe, your nosy neighbor, Mr. Monroe. No one loves families like KFC, so let the Colonel be your whole family and your couch.
Oh, God. We've got 5 more minutes. How about this? Did you guys hear about the latest weird thing that KFC has done? Did you hear about the Colonel Sanders? It's a dating simulator with it's called I Love You, Colonel Sanders. It's a lot of fun. You can download it, play it online. You can also download online. KFC put out in 2017 a romance novel. It's free. It's online. It's called The Tender Wings of Desire. And there's, oh yeah, ladies, look at that. It's set in Victorian England. You can get it on Amazon for free, and you should, really. All right, here is, this is a 1978 commercial. I'm winded. I'm not coming down there. I hope it's loud enough. It's like Kermit the Frog sitting there playing his banjo. You'll feel terrible afterwards. All right, so this is Colonel Sanders talking about his life. I thought it'd be very nice to end with a little actual real talk from the real man. So this is Colonel Sanders, kind of a little sour grapes, little unhappiness towards the end of his life. I'm going to play this. I'll come over there. He did not like the extra, or as he called it earlier, the crusty chicken. All right, here.
Life for. And we've got a lot of responsibility is to try to leave the world better than we found it for the children as they grow up, don't you?
You have no generation gap, do you?
I hope there's no generation gap. No, sir, I love them from the cradle plumb to the old folks when they get up about my age.
Colonel Sanders, did your chicken make you a wealthy man?
Well, fairly. After I started franchising, I started franchising when I was 66 years old. Now, that's an advantage again. Don't quit because you're 65, because you can do something quite worthwhile after that. So I sold out after 7.5 years of this franchise business. I sold out for $2 million. Not a lot of money. I see in the paper yesterday that the same company that I sold for $2 million sold for $240 million yesterday.
You feel you got left out?
I'm left out. That's right. I don't want nobody writing me for any money because I didn't get any of that. But with $2 million, that's enough to keep an old person in the family.
Old person, my foot. How old are you?
Well, I'll be 81 my next birthday now.
I suspect you're coming up with something new.
Well, I hope to be doing something because I don't believe in ever stopping because you'll rust out blame sight quicker than you'll wear out. And there's always something to be done.
So there he is. That is Colonel Sanders. We have talked about him for about 1 hour. I want to thank you guys very much. My name's Guy Hutchinson. I'm here all weekend. I'll be talking about a bunch of stuff. I do have my books available, which I have them $15 each. It's a very convoluted system, but I have $15 each, or 2 for $25, or 3 for $30, or 4 for $35, and you get a button. So you guys are not allowed to leave this convention with your money. So at some point, you want to stop by my table and get it. But thank you guys. I appreciate you guys coming out. I hope you have a great rest of the day.